everyone, it's JazzyCloo, and I'm here today, and I'm gonna be reading some creepypastas. This one's a bit new, but since I don't really oftenly get story submissions, I thought this would be a good start for now. So, let's go on Do Not Disturb a Moscat, if it'll load. I was just reading a creepypasta, and my computer broke. It literally just the music in the background stopped playing, the recording stopped, and I just fuck my life. I'm gonna shut down my computer. So here I am. Let's see. Let's taste a random pasta. Nom nom nom. The bell ringer. Okay. Let's see. This one will be about 8:30. 8 minutes 30 seconds. Let's do it. It's got 8.5 out of 10 pastas. Or 7.7. My bad. Here we go. Let's drink. Ugh. The bell ringer. The school bell on the old high school rung like it does every night at 12, but nobody knows who rings it. Wait. Why are people at school at 12 at night? Anyway. Nobody knows why either. Some say that the bells are rung to call all the spirits to the school, but that might just be part of an urban legend. I don't know why the bell rings, but I do know who or what it is that's ringing it. But to be honest, I wish I didn't know. I wish I was just like everybody else who is left to wonder every night at 12, who is ringing that damn bell? The school was shut down in 1992 after a series of mysterious deaths took place inside the school. Some people in the town believe that it was haunted by the spirits of the teens who were killed in the school back in 1972. Some say that they heard whispers as they walked by, and some say that they've heard people staring at them through the windows. Nobody was ever brave enough to spend over an hour in the school. The longest anybody had ever spent was 45 minutes, and that was during the daylight. But myself and my partner, Charlie, had agreed to spend an entire night in the school for our web shadow, Ghost Seekers. We came all the way from Australia and arrived at the school at 11:30, just before midnight. We gathered all of our equipment, flashlights, cameras, and everything else we used for our ghost seeking. We entered the building, kicking the pile of empty bottles and soda cans in the way. I was up for the challenge, but deep down inside, I was secretly afraid, and I knew that Charlie was as well. I wish we knew just what we were getting into. Sorry, it's a bit loud. "Hello!" Charlie yelled, his voice echoing through the school. "Hello, hello." We had our cameras on record and our flashlights in our right hands as we walked through the halls of the abandoned school. Everything was calm in the first 15 minutes until we heard the sound of a locker closing. The sound echoed throughout the building. Every sound pretty much had an echo to it. We decided to follow the sound down the hall where the old gym was. According to our research, 8 students were killed in the gym, and we thought that was a good place to start. When we entered the gym, we could immediately feel that something was in there. We didn't need our EMF to be sure. The air was cold, and the sound from our walkie-talkies were nothing but static. Something was interfering with the signal. We at least had some light from the moon that shined through the large windows, so it wasn't completely dark. As we were walking through the gym, the bell in the bell tower went off. It must have been midnight. I saw the bell tower through the gym windows, and at the time, I thought maybe I was imagining things because I saw someone up there. It was a silhouette of what appeared to be a man. I shook it off and continued what I was doing. Despite the obvious fact of a presence, we weren't getting much activity in the gym. No whispers, no footsteps, nothing. It was until we were heading out that something happened. A basketball suddenly came rolling towards us from the back of the room, an area where the light wasn't shining. It was an old, dusty ball, and I admit that it had me feeling uneasy about the situation. I was a veteran at ghost hunting, but I had never experienced something like that. It wasn't much, though, compared to what happened next. We were walking through the halls of the second floor when I noticed something weird about one of the rooms. I looked through the rectangular glass and I noticed a TV was on. It was strange because there was no power in the school. As I continued looking, I was startled by a sudden darkness that covered my view. It was just completely dark, as if someone or something was blocking it off. "Hey, mate," I said to Charlie, "there's someone in there." "No way there is," Charlie said before looking through the glass himself. We were both shocked, and the reason for that was because we never actually saw a spirit before. All we ever saw were dark shadows in the footage we caught. But this wasn't a shadow. This was something more sinister. According to our research, this was the room where the killer shot himself. He was dressed in all black. When I looked back inside the room, the TV was off, and whoever was standing in front of the door was gone. It was standing there for over a minute, and I honestly was ready to make a run for the door, but Charlie kept me from doing so. I wish he hadn't. We continued walking through the halls. By this time, we were hearing all kinds of noises echoing throughout the school. We heard footsteps, lockers opening and closing, and we heard loud crash noises that sounded as if someone was being thrown. It seemed like the more we stayed in there, the weirder things would get. Charlie thought that if we split up, we'd be able to get more footage faster. "The more footage we get, the less time we'll spend in here," he claimed. Though I agreed with him, I didn't think it was worth it. Nonetheless, I found myself wandering the halls alone. "See anything weird yet, mate?" Charlie asked through the walkie-talkie. Thankfully, I wasn't hearing or seeing anything strange. I kept walking down the halls. My flashlight suddenly started flickering. The batteries were just put in there. There's no way it could have been dying. But it did, and I found myself alone in the dark. Or maybe I wasn't alone. "My bloody flashlight died," I said into the walkie-talkie. No reply. "Charlie, are you there?" Static. Nothing but static. I could hear someone trying to say something. "He's behind you," whispers from the walkie. I turned around, but I didn't see or hear anything. I stood there in the dark, amazed I'd yet to piss my pants. A minute or two later, I heard a scream that echoed through the halls. It was Charlie. I didn't know what to do. I screamed his name. I called him over the walkie-talkie, but got no answer. I froze in fear, and I didn't move until I heard a voice echoing through the halls. It sounded as if they were far away, like on the other side of the school. "Steve, where are you?" "I'm over here," I yell. "I can't see shit, mate." I start walking, and then suddenly I was grabbed and pulled in the corner. I was screaming, tried to fight him off until I realized it was Charlie. "Don't do that, mate," I yelled. "I heard you calling me. Why didn't you answer back?" He had a strange look on his face. I could see in his eyes how terrified he was. "That wasn't me, mate," he said. "I never called you." We decided that the fame, ratings, or any of that stuff was no longer worth it. We replaced the battery in our flashlights and walked back to the front entrance. We reached the entrance minutes later, but for some reason the door was locked. We kicked it, punched it, rammed it with our shoulders, but it would not open. We were trapped, and we realized there was probably no way out. Somebody or something didn't want us to leave, so we decided to stay put. We had our backs against the door, and we didn't move. I was greatly regretting ever stepping foot in that damn school, and I'm sure Charlie was as well. I woke up about 30 minutes later. I must have dozed off. I looked around. Charlie wasn't anywhere in sight. "Charlie!" I whispered into my walkie. "Where the bloody hell are you?" No answer. Just static. I stood up on my feet, and I noticed someone at the end of the hall. They were just standing there, about 50 feet away. "Charlie? Is that you, mate?" I started to walk slowly toward whoever it was. I heard my pulse beating, echoing through the halls, my breath swiftly moving in and out of my mouth, my footsteps faintly touching the floor. As I got closer, I realized it was not Charlie at all. I stood still, but I could still hear my pulse beating, my breath still moving swiftly in and out. He was just staring at me. He was probably staring at me the whole time I was asleep, the whole time I was slowly walking toward him. He was in some black janitor suit, and his face was pale with multiple stitches all over. His eyes were dark. I saw the evil within. His head was tilted sideways as he continued to stare. I didn't understand what it was I was looking at. I'd never seen a spirit so real before, but he wasn't just a spirit. He was a demon. "Run!" something from my walkie yelled, and it was most certainly wasn't Charlie. I ran. I didn't know where I was running to. I just ran, and I didn't look back. I ran into a classroom on the other side of the school, and I locked the door, knowing that whatever it was a spirit. A locking door wouldn't stop it, but it made sense at the time. I stayed in there for about 10 minutes. It was dark, and I didn't know whether or not someone else was in the room with me. "Steve? Steve, it's me!" It was coming from Milwaukee. "Where the bloody hell are you, Charlie?" I don't know. I woke up in some room." "What room? Where are you, mate?" I could hear him weeping through the walkie. "Steve, I'm scared," he cried. I started tearing up myself. I never heard him cry like that before. I'd known him since we were 14, and I've never heard that. "It'll be okay, Charlie. We'll be okay," I cried, hoping I was right. He was weeping uncontrollably. I knew that something was wrong. "You don't understand, mate," he cried. "Look to the right corner of the room." I lifted my I lifted my flashlight. I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I pointed to the corner, and I literally froze in fear. I dropped the walkie to the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. He was dead. Charlie was dead. "I'm sorry, mate." That was the last time I ever spoke to him. I didn't understand how he died. There was no blood, no cuts or anything. I guess he saw something that literally took his breath away. I didn't even think about how I was talking to him over the walkie, and though he was clearly dead. The only thing I thought about was that my best friend of 20 years was gone, and I didn't know what to do next. I thought about it, and I realized it must have happened when we split up. His scream. I kept thinking about his scream. I lay there with his body, and I woke up hours later to the sun shining upon my face. I'd never been so happy to see the sun. I figured it was over. I pulled out my phone, and I was finally able to call the police. They arrived, and I was finally free of that school and whatever haunts it. I drove away, never looking back. That school needs to be burned down, and hopefully it can kill the demon that lives within it. I can't go anywhere anymore without feeling like I'm being watched. I was traumatized, and I still am. I see what can never be unseen, and no matter how many hours of therapy I go through, I'll never be the same person I was before. I wonder if anyone ever seen Charlie through the windows, or even heard his whispers as they walked by. If they had, I hope they weren't scared, because Charlie was a great guy. If you ever see him, tell Steve said hi, and that he misses him dearly. I don't think I will ever forget what happened in that school. I would never forget the sound of that bell, and I would never forget the demonic face of the thing that rings it. I could see him now, standing up on that bell tower, waiting for midnight, and waiting for his next victim. So that was The Bell Ringer. A very interesting story. I think the 7 is about good. It's a good and scary, heartbreaking story, but it doesn't really explain much. First, I couldn't tell if it was a girl or a guy until the Steve came up, and then, I don't know, it was just a bit confusing, but still a very good story, and it was very sad at the end. Let's taste a new pasta. Bing. I'll do 3 of them. How about that? The Dark Room. Oh, hello. 8.8. This one's a bit longer, but it's okay. It's got a really good rating. Let's go, guys. The Dark Room. Alone, he stands in the middle of the room, surrounded by dark walls with nothing but a dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling right above him. A man with light brown skin and black hair that messily reach his shoulders blankly stares at the light. His beard, full and untamed, had spots of dirt and grime. He wears glasses that frame his deep blue eyes and short eyelashes. A dirty white lab coat overlaps his tucked-in black shirt and ripped blue jeans. Thinking deeply, he tries to put together the events that had led up to his captivity. He was just a scientist who was trying to find a cure for the outbreak, but the government thought otherwise. They thought it was he and his team who had spread the disease even further. The government was looking for someone to blame to ease the minds and voices of the quickly depleting population. And who better than the only remaining scientist left who had anything to do with their project? On! Samson! The scientist takes his fixed gaze away from the light bulb and looks toward the reinforced door. It was too dark to see on the other side of the room, but he had heard the heavy clank of metal, indicating one of the guards had opened the slot of the door. Are you ready to talk? Samson keeps quiet for a moment. They've kept him here in the dark room for 4 days, deprived of food and water. Being a scientist, Samson knows what deprivation of food and water does to the human body. He was dizzy and fatigued. Simply everyday tasks become difficult to do. What's the point? Samson replies calmly with a dry mouth. I've answered all your questions, but you will not even hear. The door slot slams with that same heavy clank of metal. He sighs deeply and walks towards the wall behind him, slowly, with his hand out reach trying to feel for the wall. He sits down in the darkness and stares back at the dim light. He then closes his eyes and thinks about his wife, for it was the only thing keeping him sane and alive. Her beautiful face and the memories they shared. He must survive. He had sent his wife, Emily, to France after assembling the team of scientists who were trying to find a cure. He sent her there in fear that his wife would join those who had been infected by the disease, but that was a couple of months ago. He missed her so. She was the only person he had left in his life. Everyone he knew was gone. His neighbors, his parents, and the old couple from the flower shop. The flower shop, he thought. Samson remembers buying his wife flowers for the anniversary about a month before the outbreak. He and his wife were very good friends with the old, lovely couple that ran the flower shop. The old couple would tell Samson that he and his wife reminded him so much of themselves when they were younger, and that Samson was taking the right path to a happy life. Samson holds back tears as he remembers to reminisce about the day he had gone into the flower shop for his anniversary. Here is the scene, I think. Samson, your wife is a very lucky woman, a cheery voice cries. Thank you for your kind words, Miss Ramos, but it's nothing, really, Samson exclaims, blushing. Sorry, my dog's an evil little shit. I'm going to reread that part. Samson, your wife is a lucky woman, a cheery voice cries. Thank you for your kind words, Miss Ramos, but it's nothing much, really, Samson exclaims, blushing. Oh, nonsense. You come here every week. You always have something for her to show your love. These aren't just words, Samson. This is the truth, insists Miss Ramos with a delighted smile. She is wearing her favorite red flower apron and a pink dress under it. Look who we have here, blasts a voice excitedly, powerful, but calming to Samson. So what will you be getting this time around, Samson? Same thing as last week? Good morning, Mr. Ramos, answers Samson. Actually, I was thinking about getting her something a little different today. It's her anniversary and I wanted to get her something extra special. Ah, I've got just the thing for you, Samson, Mr. Ramos says. He wore a white polo with khakis and had a smile that never seemed to leave his face. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Mr. Ramos makes his way to the back of the store. Within a minute, Mr. Ramos comes back with the most brilliant bouquet Samson has ever seen. The flowers are vivid, exotic, everything he could have imagined. Samson was speechless. We got these a few days ago, Mr. Ramos continues. We saved them just for you. Wow, this is just amazing. It's perfect. Thank you. How much will... Stop right there, Mr. Ramos interrupts. Now, who said anything about you having to pay for this? Oh, no, please, let me pay for this. It must be expensive, Samson pleads. Mr. Ramos looks at his wife with a smile. She smiles back, and Mr. Ramos hands a bouquet to Samson. Think of it as our present to you and Emily. Happy anniversary." That's the end of the scene. Samson opens his eyes. He realized that he let out a few tears after all. What a lovely couple. He hoped that he and his wife would be just as happy as they were when the time came for them to be their age. He closes his eyes again and imagines the old couple being so full of joy. A light smile, serving as a glimmer of happiness, falls within his tired expression, but soon it fades. He had almost forgotten what happened. When the outbreak came, Samson checked on the old couple to see if they were okay, but was instead met with an image he will never forget. The vision of the lovely couple was soon replaced with the horrifying picture of their half-eaten bodies and ridiculously angled bones. Memories of that day start to fill Samson's mind. He remembers everything. Here's the scene. "Mr. Ramos! Mr. Ramos! Hello! Is anyone here?" Samson paces quickly outside of the flower shop. He hears the piercing sounds of sirens and alarms as he calls out for the couple. The diseased have reached their city, and Samson wanted to bring them with him and his wife to some safe place. He tries the front door of the flower shop, but it was locked. Hastily, he goes around the building, hoping to find another entrance. A few seconds later, he comes upon the back door of the shop. He places his hand on the doorknob and feels relief when it twists open. Samson enters the back room carefully and starts calling out the couple again in a calmer tone. "Miss Ramos, are you here? We need to get out of this city." Samson feels as if he was talking to himself, but he couldn't assume no one was there. As he walks through the room carefully, a foul stench befalls his sense of smell. He covers his nose and looks around the room for the source. His eyes search around the room and soon meet the sight of a dried bouquet of flowers on a shelf across him. It was the same set of flowers that the old couple had given to Samson and his wife as an anniversary gift. Samson's motivation for a search grows, remembering everything the old couple has done for them. Finding nothing else in the room, Samson makes his way towards a door that leads to a small hallway and calls out again, "Mr. Ramos! Mr. Ramos! Suddenly his heart drops. Samson turns the corner and sees the deceased, 3 of them to be exact, crouching, feeding at the end of the hallway. Samson goes quiet and feels true fear. He has never seen one before, but he knows that they were the diseased. Never taking his eyes off them, Samson starts to walk backwards in the previous room. After a few steps, the fear he feels grows even larger as thoughts race about who the disease could have been devouring. Determined to find out, Samson halts his retreat and starts to move forward again. Sweating and shaking, he quietly makes his way toward the creatures. There were 2 rooms that lay before him. One was a few feet away on the left, and the other was the diseased on his right. He entered the first room as he encountered it and put his back against the wall where the door was hinged. He carefully peeked out and calculated how far the next room was. Silently, he inched closer and closer to the next door. Suddenly and quickly, one of the diseased jerks its head up. Samson stops dead in his tracks and holds his breath. The disease keeps its posture and sniffs the air while the other 2 continue with their feast. Not daring to alarm them, Samson stands still and makes no sound. He listens to them eat. The gushing of blood, the breaking of bones, and the tearing of muscles soon fill his ears. Finally, the diseased went back to his meal. Samson keeps his position for a few more seconds before moving again. More cautiously, he slowly makes his way to the other room. When inside, Samson puts his back against the wall and sits down on the floor. He takes deep, quick breaths as he looks down. Holding his forehead with both his hands, he realizes that the foul stench he smelled from above filled this room. Regaining his initial curiosity, he stands up with the intent of searching the room. From first glance, he had already known that this was the storage room. Discreetly, he ruffles through boxes and little trinkets that obscure his path. Using his sense of smell, he attempts to sniff out whatever he was looking for. Shelves reaching the roof, standing in the middle of the room. A flickering light in the top corner of the room gives momentary visions of the mess scattered around. During the intervals that the light shines, Samson quickly looks around for anything worth looking into. By the sixth time he tries, he spots flies hovering around in the corner of the room across the light bulb. Samson makes his way toward the flies, making sure he is not making too much noise. Once he reaches the corner, he slowly stands up and looks closely. His expression quickly changes from curious to horrified as he faces the dead bodies of the old couple. He falls to his knees with an awestruck look as he stares at them. Their arms have been broken in many ways and directions. Mr. Ramos, wearing his blue overalls and white shirt, had his neck broken and dangling. His stomach, along with Miss Ramos, was robbed of its belongings. What was left of their intestines hung from the holes created by the diseased. Miss Ramos, wearing her red flower apron and white gloves, no longer had her right arm and only half of her other. A deep color of red covered their exposed bones. Their legs, once full of fat and muscles, were nothing more but leftovers for the rats. Samson was stuck in a shocked state. The smell, though stronger, no longer bothers him. The situation was too much for him to comprehend. Suddenly the old couple groans quietly. Both have a quick 2-second spasm and groan again, but louder. Snapping out of his trance, Samson shakes his head and gets back up again while backing away. Tears roll down his face and the old couple start to move, having difficulty because of their broken bodies. They look helpless and desperate. Samson feels a heavy sadness in his heart, knowing that he can do nothing for them now. "I'm sorry," he silently says with regret and walks away. Only a step away from stepping into the hall, he hears the diseased around the corner snarl. Samson had completely forgotten about him. Being aware of his surroundings again, he takes precautions for his escape. He peeks out once and takes a quick glance at the diseased. Sneakily, he walks away from them into the first room. He heads toward the door and passes by the dried flowers, never seeing them again. As soon as Samson steps outside, he shuts the door closed and falls down on the ground, completely breaking apart. He sobs, cursing the infection and everything religious. He pounds the ground with his fist, causing them to bleed. The echoed noises of shrieks and agony did not faze his sadness. A couple of minutes pass and he pulls himself together. He wipes his face and rips off part of his shirt, using it to cover his bleeding hand. Fearing it will leave a trail to his home, he gets up and prepares himself to return his wife. Samson ran. He ran nonstop through the city, hearing random screams and cries for help. Why, he thought. Why is this happening? What have we done to deserve something like this? Scene is over. Sorry. Samson woke up to a banging sound coming from the door. He didn't realize he had fallen asleep, but was thankful for being woken up. He didn't want to think about the old couple anymore. Still weak and weary, Samson stays seated and waits for the guard to open the slot. To his surprise, it was not just the slot of the door that opens, but the whole door. Samson squints his eyes. The brightness from the outside of the room was something his eyes were not used to anymore. Still, he looks towards the door. He sees the silhouette of one of the guards standing right outside of the room. Soon, 2 more figures joined the guard. One of them was another guard, but he could not figure out who the third figure was. The third silhouette looked quite frail and seemed to have a bag over his head. Perhaps another prisoner? Samson asks himself. Then he notices a sort of chain coming from the guard's belt and into the figure's neck. The guards push the figure inside the room hard enough to have let him hit the ground. The guard comes inside the room and quickly moves the bag to the figure's head. Samson's muscles tighten all around his body. This person, or more so, thing on the floor, snaps its teeth in the air. It started twisting and writhing. Its face contorted with pure hunger and violent rage. Its eyes, once a different color, are nothing but shades of yellow. The guards have brought in one of the diseased. The guards then releases the creature from its chain and calmly walk out. As the door slams shut, the guards wave at Samson, mocking his situation. Those bastards, he thought. Who in his right mind would do something like this? Having no other option, Samson mentally readies himself for his upcoming confrontation. He closes his eyes and quickly counts to 3. A deep breath follows after as he opens his eyes. Samson stands up weakly. He musters everything he has in him to stand up. He was stuck in darkness with a single light bulb that didn't even illuminate the whole room with one of those creatures. His eyes, moving swiftly, scanned the room from left to right non-stop. Though he was exhausted, Samson controls his breathing. He was tired to stand, and he didn't even dare to sit back down. So he stands waiting and listens to the creature sniffing around with its occasional moans and groans. The scent soon filled the room, smelling like a mixture of vinegar and human waste. The stench makes Samson gag, and the disease hears him. The creature snaps its teeth again and gave a quick snarl towards his direction and got louder, hungrier. It knows that there was food in the room. Samson had given away his position. The groans were getting closer and closer until it gives a fierce growl not more than 5 feet away from him. Samson frantically runs, dodging blindly from one corner of the room to the next. He cannot see it, only hear it, but the creature could smell him. It knew exactly where to go. Finally, Samson decided to run toward the middle of the room where the only source of light shines. He runs and stops at the edge where the light reaches its end. He turns around and finally sees the creature for the first time, walking quickly towards him. It was no man, but a woman. Light gray skin, an open stomach, a nasty gash from her right eye going down to her lower lip, and her whole left cheek missing. "Come here, you ugly bastard," Samson thought. She snarled louder as she was finally able to see her dinner. She reaches violently for Samson, her hands outreached with fingernails pointed and ready to dig. With all the energy Samson has left, he grabs both her forearms before she is able to get a hold of him. He almost wanted to let go, but he's never actually held one before, and the feeling of this woman's body was not what he had expected. Her skin feels very soft and cold. It felt as if it could have been ripped off at any given moment. She was as soft as a baby's blanket and as cold as ice, but she was incredibly strong. The disease have no threshold for pain, giving them no limit. Samson struggles with the creature. He's trying to knock her down so he could give her one big head stomp, but she continuously snarls at him and tries to bite him. Samson was losing hope. He couldn't stop her, and unlike the diseased, humans get tired. He closes his eyes for what he thinks was the final time he will, but an image of his wife appears in his mind. Memories flood him. With renewed resolution, Samson tightens his grip on her forearms, lifts his right leg, and gives one final kick to her chest. The skin on the creature's arms and hams slide off into his own, but he couldn't be disgusted by this right now. She snarls loudly as she looks at him with angry eyes from the ground. With a loud yell and all his might, Samson drives his foot into the creature's head. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 stomps and it finally stops moving. He stands there once again, under that light, staring down with anger in his eyes and staggered breathing. His whole body shivers as he stands above the creature, making sure it was no longer alive. He keeps his arm tense and flexed, prepared for another conflict. After a few moments, he calms down. It's over. He wipes his hand on his clothes to get rid of the skin from the creature. As he did, he hears a small sound. A sound that a coin would make if it dropped to the ground. He searches the floor and sees a small object reflecting the faint light. It was a ring. It was stuck to the soft skin that was pulled off the creature's hands. Samson remembers that these were once people too. Curious, he picks up the ring, sits right next to the creature, and examines the ring. Inside the ring, something was engraved. Samson drops his jaw and widens his eyes with belief. Together forever, Samson and Emily. Why? That was messed up. Oh, come on. It was an interesting story, but I was able to, sorry. It was really predictable. I was able to pretty much, predict everything that was about to happen. There were no plot twists or anything to it. And I had a feeling it was his wife, but it was still sad. A well-written story as well. Okay, so I said I was going to do 3 stories. So here's our third one. Random pasta, bing! Okay, Hatman. Only has a 6.2 rating. I don't know. Let me see the comments. Maybe a new one. Not a very good rating. Restraint. Kind of a low rating as well. It's only a minute. Let's try again. Another really low one. Another very, very low one. Well, that poor young man. I'll be back with a good pasta. Oh, hello. Just as I spoke. The painting. Okay. Let's do it, guys. The painting. Or painting. Ong. When I was 7 years old, my 10-year-old brother Jamie was kidnapped, or so they say. The police claimed whoever had taken them were professional in doing so, that I had been incredibly lucky to have not been taken as well. They described the kidnapper in this way because no fingerprints were ever found in any of the furniture. My brother had never made a sound at the time, and most importantly, there was no sign of a break-in at all. None of the windows had been broken. The doors weren't busted. Nothing. Several days before his disappearance, my father found a painting while rummaging around in the attic. He had been trying to find this old bass guitar after I had asked him if he played any instruments. It turned out he used to play in a band with some of his friends, and he was a pretty decent player. His group was called Serrated Edge. Unfortunately, after an hour of searching, the guitar was never found. Wait, I thought he said bass. Oh, bass guitar, my bad. Searching the guitar was never found, but the painting was. It had been placed against the wall and surrounded by boxes. My father had noticed the goddamn... My father had noticed the golden frame glancing as he walked around. The painting itself was magnificent as he lowered it down. It seemed to be in good condition despite being in the attic for so long. There was a house in the picture. A large gray house surrounded by grass. In the background, a cliff could be seen. There was then a sudden drop which evened out to an ocean. It stretched out into the distance. Some birds could be seen up above circling the house. On the back were scrawled some words in red ink that read, Gidel Ibn Ihun. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't recognize that. My mother recognized it as Welsh. We didn't know what else it meant at the time. My brother and I weren't very ecstatic about having it as a new house decoration, but my father loved its simplicity. He decided to put it up in our bedroom. That night we had dinner as usual. Spaghetti, I believe. Then my brother and I went upstairs for bed. We both shared the same room. We were slightly afraid of the dark, so our door was left ajar most days, letting some of the light seep in. After getting changed into our pajamas and joking around for a bit, we both settled down to sleep. It was around 2 a.m. when I awoke. I realized I was hot and sweaty, so pulled myself into a sitting position. Jamie went into his own bed by my left, sleeping soundly. My throat was parched, so I figured I'd get a drink of water. I pulled myself out of the bed sheets and left the room as quietly as possible, creaking the door open. Softly I crept down the hall, conscious that the floorboards creaked. The last thing I wanted to do was wake everyone up. I headed into the bathroom. When I returned, I was refreshed and pulled myself back into bed. I had pretty much stood my head under the tap and lapped up water like a cat, cupping in my hands and splashing my face as well. As I pulled myself back into the bed, I noticed something odd about the painting on the wall. There seemed to be a black smudge to the right of the house, something I hadn't noticed earlier. Curiously, I pulled myself back to my feet and approached the painting, as I couldn't quite make out what was properly in the dark. On closer inspection, I gathered that the smudge was some sort of man. It resembled a human but was completely black. It looked like it was standing stationary, looking outwards. His head was cocked over slightly to one side. I considered walking Jamie to show him his mysterious figure, but he decided he'd be cranky if I did so. I'd wait until the morning. I retreated to my bed. When morning arrived, the figure was gone, to my dismay. I told Jamie about the figure, but he didn't seem to believe me. For the rest of the day, I watched the painting suspiciously, believing that it may appear again at any moment. It didn't. As my brother and I were climbing back into the bed, that night I had forgotten about the figure, that is, until something happened again. Just as before, I awoke in the early hours of the morning, soaked in sweat. This time I anticipated the figure's arrival and glanced at the painting straight away. I felt a twinge of fear. The smudge was there again, but it had moved, and it had doubled in size. It had adopted a new position, right in front of the house, a few meters away from the front door. Instead of going over for a closer inspection, I forced myself to go back to sleep, hoping with every fiber of my being that I was dreaming. That night I fell asleep, shaking in fear. The next day was uneventful. I avoided the painting for the most part, spending time in the living room downstairs watching TV. I mentioned about the dark figure to my parents that day, and they, of course, didn't believe me. "You were just dreaming, Harry. That's all," they told me. This was the last day I ever spent with my brother. That night I had awoken at a similar time again, around 2 a.m. Can't remember exactly what time. With dread and fear churning in my stomach, I reluctantly glanced at the painting. It was completely black. I remember physically shaking in terror, believing that if I made the slightest noise I would trigger something. Slowly I pulled myself out from under the bed sheets. I crept over to the bedroom door and ran over to the bathroom, the flipboards creaking as I went. I locked myself inside. I figured I'd stay here until morning, then asked my father to put the painting back in the attic the next day. There was obviously something wrong with it. I didn't know what. What happened next will stay with me as long as I live. After several minutes of waiting in the bathroom, I heard the floorboards creak in the hall outside. At first I thought my brother had woken up, disturbed by my footsteps running down the hall. The creaking was approaching the bathroom, and stopped just outside the door. "Jamie?" I whispered. No response. I knew someone was standing right on the other side of the door. I just couldn't figure out what they were trying to do. Did they need to use the bathroom? "Mum?" I said. To this I heard a scratching sound on the other side of the door, as if someone was dragging their fingers across it. I backed away, terrified. After a moment, whoever it was walked away, their footsteps creaking their way towards my room. The next day I awoke in the bathtub to the sound of banging. It was my father. He was thumping the outside of the door with his fist. "Harry? Jamie? Are you in there?" he snapped. I answered it slowly, still from lying in such an uncomfortable position. Apparently this morning when my parents had awoken they found our room empty. My mum went downstairs to find us, and my dad looked around upstairs. "Is your brother in there?" He had asked when I opened the door. I shook my head, but he didn't believe me, and he pushed past, searching the room. It was only after another half hour something that my parents began to panic. The police were called around. Everyone was convinced someone had broken into the house and taken him in the night. The police believed I had locked myself in the bathroom to hide from the kidnapper out of fear. They questioned me relentlessly about whether I had seen his face. I couldn't answer. There was something else. On the outside of the bathroom door there was deep gauges, diagonal from top left to bottom right. The police believed that they were caused by a knife, repeatedly dragged across the surface. They claimed that the kidnapper had been trying to get me as well, but had thankfully given in. Our house was closed off for several days and were provided with a hotel, while the police searched for the fingerprints for any signs of breaking and entering. As I said at the start, they found nothing. When we finally returned to our home, my parents were a teary mess. They moped around slowly, answering my questions with one-word answers. I knew anything I said about the painting at this point was useless. No one ever seems to listen to children in times of need. They continued to act like this for half a year. It was a horrible time. Returning to my bedroom after everything that had happened was horrible. I remember crying when I saw my brother's empty bed, his toys that were still scattered across the floor, toys you may never ever be able to play with again. Before I turned to the room, I glanced at the painting one final time and noticed something peculiar. There was no dark figure. There was something strange in one of the house windows. Curiously, I approached to look closer. It was a face, a little boy, and from what I could tell, looking the splitting image of my brother. His face was contorted into one of terror, and he had tears streaming down his face. His hands were both pressed up against the glass. Several months later, the police gave up on the search. His funeral was held on April the 12th, to this date the saddest day of my life. After that, all we could do was get on with our lives. I showed my parents the painting, and they shouted at me and stashed it back in the attic. They thought the boy had been in the painting all along, but I was simply imagining the resemblance. I am 30 years old now, and have a place of my own. When I eventually left my old home, that I made sure to take the painting with me, for I am the only one who truly knows what happened to my brother. The dark shape I saw all those years was some kind of entity, something evil that intended to trap us both in the painting for an eternity. It succeeded with my brother, but I had locked myself in the bathroom, so I'd been saved. I keep the painting in the attic now, in case one day I might be able to free him. I can't lose hope, like my parents did. After researching, I found out the words in the back of the painting. Gadel ibn in Hun had been a warning. It translates to English as leave alone. Sometimes in the dead of the night, I'll hear a thumping sound coming from up there, footsteps roaming around the attic. I'll always shout my brother's name and hope he may have finally been let out, and never get a response. Well, that was sad. Alrighty, well that's all the stories for now. I hope you guys all enjoyed. I'll leave links to each of the stories. They're pretty much, it's just like the link, it's creepypasta.com/the name. So this one is creepypasta.com/painting. And then so forth, creepypasta.com/the-dark-room. Like this way dash to horizontal. Alright, well that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe and comment if you have any requests for me to read. And just as always, if you have any stories you would like to share that are real, I repeat, real stories that have happened to you or someone you know or anything like that, you can send it to JazzyCloo@live.com. Email. In the subject, explain what it is. I would like more towards the horror side, like it could be almost kidnapped or turn the twisting of I got kidnapped or almost kidnapped or something like that. Just include what it's about. Everything is anonymous unless you specifically ask for credit. I will not share anything else but the story, and you will not be ratted out or anything like that. I recommend you change names if you need to stay anonymous in the story. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye!